What is an arborist? How do you define safety on your crew? What is your strategy for selling tree work? Are trees sentient beings? And why wigs and aerial rescue do not mix. Through a mix of deep dives on individual subjects, getting out and field testing our equipment, and interviews with the people that make up our industry, Tree Thinking will answer these questions and many more as we try to understand the tree world around us on the Tree Thinking Podcast. We had a great time talking with Craig. He has an awesome vision for our profession. He's going to tell you how he sees it, and that makes for a great conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy. Going to take care of some business, and then we'll get right into it. Oh, one more thing. If you want to be part of the discussion, please find us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also send us an email at treethinkingpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your opinions. We'd love to make you part of the discussion, so reach out and we can make that happen. Rate and review us wherever you're getting the podcast. If you give us 5 stars, it's really going to help us spread the word and get the podcast out there to more people, so that would be much appreciated. Thank you guys so much for listening. It's a lot of fun to do, and it's awesome to see that people enjoy it.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not, nor is it intended to be, a substitute for professional arboriculture advice and should never be relied upon to perform or direct arboricultural work. The Tree Thinking Podcast makes no representations as to the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of any information on this podcast and will not be liable for any damages arising from the use of any information in the practice of arboriculture or tree work. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The podcast and its hosts are not to be held responsible for misuse, cited, and or uncited copies of the content within this podcast by others. The Tree Thinking Podcast may not be reproduced or distributed without the express written consent of the Tree Thinking Podcast.
Set it.
Let's tango.
We know Craig from his extremely informative webinars and the safety, knowledge, and enthusiasm he brings to judging at tree climbing competitions. He's a speaker, writer, and presenter at conferences. And on top of all that, he built Tree 133, a successful company that specializes in tree preservation rather than tree removal. He's a certified arborist with a degree in environmental science and 33 years in climbing to back it up. On this episode of the Tree Thinking Podcast, we ask about the value of mentorship, the future of our profession, what it means to build our company towards preservation rather than the temptation of the cash grab of removals. On Building for the Future with Craig Bachmann. All right, we're back again, and we are stoked because we got a guest today. I think we've all kind of known of Craig for a while through competitions and through these webinars, and so we're all really stoked to sit down and have a conversation with you, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Oh, hey, guys. Thank you all for having me here. And that intro, wow. It sounds like I should know what I'm talking about. I hope I can live up to that. You were very kind to put that together. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you know what you're talking about because that's why we brought you on. We're just the bumbling idiots here. My name's Andrew.
Jamie.
Becca.
And Corey.
And, yeah, we're going to get into, well, we'll see where it goes. I say we start off with some stories from the field. What, anybody got any good stories?
Let me see if, Craig, do you have one?
Yeah. Ooh, gosh, I was actually just pulling up my calendar on my computer to look at what in the heck did I do this week. Yeah, I've got a good story from the field, and it's about something we didn't do.
Okay.
And if I can set it up very briefly, I will work on brief. It's Friday.
Oh, take your time.
We do a lot of canopy reduction on large conifers, Douglas firs in particular. For those of you listening who are not PNW folks, Doug firs out here are one of our dominant native large conifers, and up to 140 feet, 160 feet, maybe 50, 60 inches at the base, and limbs 30 plus feet long. And they're a little bit notorious for dropping limbs in windstorms. dropping, maybe that anthropomorphizes them a little bit, but having green limbs fail in wind and snow events. So one of the things that we do is we help clients retain those trees and feel comfortable and confident with them by performing canopy reduction, by shortening the lever arm, and going out to the ends of these long limbs and making targeted pruning cuts. Anyway, we were supposed to be over on the east side of Lake Washington in Bellevue, reducing one of these big trees. And one of our certified arborist colleagues called me the night before, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm feeling sick, and I think it might be the big COVID. I'm going to get a test." And I hadn't seen him in a couple of weeks, and so I wasn't worried about my own exposure, but I appreciated him coming to us proactively. And he said, "Hey, man, we got to do what we got to do. Take care of yourself, take care of your family." So it was myself and my wife, Joanna, who is our junior ground squirrel. Joanna's actually the operations manager for our company, but she likes the title ground squirrel, also known as arborist apprentice. And so she and I rolled out to this job, and this tree, as always, right, is way bigger than I remembered.
Oh yeah,
way bigger. It's probably been 8 weeks since I saw this tree, and it's 40 inches CSH, and it's probably 125, 130 feet overhanging the house.
I think firs are especially good at being deceptive, like you see it from afar and then you walk up to it, or you get in the canopy and see those limbs like, oh my gosh, this is a 35-foot limb. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're driving out there, and she says to me, "Are we biting off more than we can chew today?" And I said, "Well, nah, we can do this, let's get her done, right?" So we roll up there, and as we're arriving, she reminded me of some training that we'd had in the past. We used to do a lot of backcountry skiing and had some avalanche hazard awareness training. And one of the things they talk about is the idea of yellow flags. Like green means go, red means stop, and yellow means caution. And the idea is sometimes we don't always have red flags. We don't have an immediate stop. But we start to have things pile up. There's one yellow flag after another, after another, after another. And over time, those add up potentially to disaster. And she reminded me of that, which I was really glad she brought it up. We showed up, we looked at this tree, and I said, "Yeah, let's look closer. Let's talk to the client. I don't know. I think we can do it." And then there's another pickup truck that shows up. And there's a guy standing in the house that looks an awful lot like a contractor. Client opens the door and says, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. We're also going to be replacing the windows in the house today." "Oh, yeah? Which windows?" "Oh, the ones on the side and in the back." "Oh." And I'm glad we found out about it. And she said, "I apologize. The windows came in early, and we just wanted to try to get it done." I said, "Totally. And you know what? This is perfect."
Yeah.
Because this is the red flag that I need
Yeah.
to not do this job, to not get in over my head and put my wife, our apprentice, on the ground in a bad spot. Because I can do the climbing, sure, but we all know it's not the climber alone that makes the job work. It's the team.
Right.
And it's often the skill set of the most junior person that we are counting on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad she brought up the concern, and I'm grateful for the yellow flags conversation and the big red flag of windows being replaced under tree. And we said, "Nope.
No, thank you.
Nope, let's not. We will come back. Thank you very much." So that's my story from the field.
That's great.
Well, and that's so important to listen to those things, because so often people get like, I need to get that job done. It's been hanging out on the books for a while, and I just need to overcome whatever obstacles show up. And that might not always be the answer. That a matter of fact, sometimes those obstacles are telling you something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important to listen.
I think too, like more than 3 yellow flags kind of turns into a red flag.
Yeah.
You got 5 yellow flags, you have 1 red.
We did that once. Remember,
Well said, Becca.
Becca and I were doing an ailanthus removal.
Oh,
and I was climbing, and I just get out over this lead over the yard. And then that's when the homeowner and his buddy decide to start erecting like they're building a shed or something underneath the lead.
Right under where
they're cracking beers, pulling out their sawhorses. Like, hey guys, this is not the best time right now.
And they just kept walking back and forth underneath this whole
what a mess.
removal.
Yeah.
It was definitely a humbling experience. Working there.
it's a reminder that when people hire us, they know what they want done. They know that something's going to happen to the tree, but they have no idea the process.
No.
Because so often they don't, or they want to watch. They just kind of come out and hang out right underneath you.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you, this is a no-go,
Who else has a story from the field? Anyone?
Well, today I had something I've never seen happen before happen. It was a cool job. We were creating some habitat stems on some dead firs, and the climbing was fun. The firs had a real hard lean. They weren't like super big in diameter, but pretty tall, maybe 75 foot, 80 foot firs. Nothing too big, and we were able to tie in to the surrounding firs and also rig to the surrounding firs. Just everything nice, controlled, smooth, fun. Everyone's having a good time with all this rigging. Our climber's up in the tree, he's working hard, and we kind of hear this commotion behind us, and we look over, and there's 2 turkeys battling it out. Like, their necks are wrapped up around each other. One has the other's head in its mouth. This is all going on under the porch of the neighboring house. They're like beating each other up against the wall. Eventually one, submitted, and like kind of the other one chased it off. But what a weird thing to see.
I've never
Our climbers
seen a
up
turkey
there
fight.
working hard, and we're just staring at these turkeys.
I kind of have a similar story from the field, I guess, in that it was Wednesday. We went out in Junction City. It was like a 40-minute drive. It was great. Beautiful country area. And apparently there's like a bunch of peacocks around this property. The guy's like, if you see one, they're fine unless they see the reflection, and then they'll attack their reflection until their head is bleeding. And I'm like, oh my God. Anyways, but we ended up not seeing any peacocks, but we could hear them all day long.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know if you ever heard a peacock make a peacock sound, but it sounds like dinosaur-like.
Can you make the sound?
That's
Wow.
as close as I can get to it, but I hope that wasn't too loud in anyone's
No,
ears.
that was good.
But it's funny
Becca,
because
did you seriously just make that sound?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
actually.
yeah.
I'm half peacock, just so you
I
know.
have just made your acquaintance. Incredible.
But I was up in this fir, which that was fun too, because there was a propane tank with a gas line underneath it, and we were just deadwooding about 60 feet up. And I was like, okay. And I used, Jamie, that technique you showed me where you make the top cut and then you come in for the bottom.
Oh, for finishing the stub off.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really nice because it was deadwood. I realized, of course, halfway down the work that I could just kick most of them off and then do a finishing cut. But whatever. That's not the point. But it was just funny because I just installed the Senna on my helmet. So I was listening to some tunes, but even with the music on, I could hear peacocks just screaming in the background. I'm like, what are we doing? This is great. So yeah, I guess that was a lot of stuff, but that was my Wednesday. It was very fun. So
Full of peacocks.
full of peacocks.
That's awesome. And I've actually got one too. This is a full stories from the field segment, but
Wow.
mine is more of a close call that we had. So on our chipper, our smaller chipper, the Vermeer 1500, it's got all of our trucks have a pintle hitch on the back of it. And if you're not familiar with pintle hitch, it's got the hook underneath and then it locks up top, right? And the receiver on the trailer is a giant, basically giant circle, and it just fits over the pintle and then locks on top of it, right? So the circle bit, it has two bolts in it, right, that sit on and attach that circle bit to the chipper itself, right?
Right.
One of those bolts had completely sheared off, and it was hard to see from, at the city we have a pretty rigorous inspection system, and it was just one of those parts that, you check off. We have a full list that we check through every morning before we roll out of the shop, but it's just one of those things that we missed this time.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it had been riding like that, but it literally had one bolt holding this chipper onto the truck,
Oh,
and the other one
wow.
was completely sheared off. And it was still kind of there and rattling around, but it was just one of those oh, wow, that could have been bad.
Wow.
That could have been really bad.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, just again, and we kind of pride ourselves in, and maybe that was our shortcoming, because this was kind of like one of those blind spots that we don't really know that we have. It's just a reminder that we always have to keep vigilant about those things. And even if it's, just a little bolt that you just have to, maybe check or maybe twist a little bit to make sure that it's still engaged and not, sheared off, maybe it's worth doing that every single time.
Well, and, I didn't think about it till now, but I wonder if what was going on, because we've had a seasonal that's been with us for a little while now, and he's been doing the inspection on the chipper. There's 3 of us in the field now. And so you've been in the boom truck, I've been in the ground truck, and he's taking care of the chipper.
Right.
And, I'm not blaming him at all, because I've been driving the ground truck, so it is my fault if anything goes wrong there.
And if anything, it's our fault, because we haven't maybe trained him properly, maybe haven't walked him through it.
Well,
whatever.
And what I'm thinking is, it's so easy to get in that rhythm. I'm doing the same truck, you're doing the same truck, he's doing the piece of equipment.
Right.
And it might be smart for us to mix it up.
Yeah.
Even if we're just kind of used to, I'll grab these keys, you grab those keys and do it. Just to get different eyes and, different perspective on it could be so important.
Yep, that's a good call.
Yeah.
Now, you guys are hitting on a really important point, and I work with a lot of situations, whether it's in climbing competitions or when I was contract climbing or in a training scenario with gear inspection.
Uh-huh.
And one of the principles is you really can't inspect your own gear very well. You're blind to those things that you see every day. And you're bringing that up exactly. When we're doing a gear inspection, someone else should inspect your gear. Swap gear with another climber. Give it to someone else, because they'll see it differently. And that's exactly what you're talking about switching inspection roles.
Yeah.
So, excellent suggestion.
Definitely.
Yeah, you could be like, yeah, I know that carabiner's a little sticky, but I know that it is, so it's fine, right? But,
Yep. And
that's smart to have someone else.
And the first time you look at it, it just barely sticks and it's not an issue.
Yeah.
But you're checking that every day, so it's slowly you're getting used to it being a little more sticky and a little more sticky, so
And before you know it, you have to hammer it open, and all of a sudden it's not so good anymore.
Yeah.
It's fine. Just don't worry about it. I've climbed on it a bunch of times.
It's fine.
But it's true.
Little rationalizing goes a long way.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Right on.
Cool.
Well, man, that was a pretty good stories from this field segment. A little bit of safety, a little bit of turkey fights. I mean, it went all over the place. Even a dinosaur call. I mean, it went all over the place there. That was great. So today, we're kind of going back and forth with the email a little bit, trying to figure out where we wanted to go with this conversation. And I love the fact that we kind of ended up going on kind of preparing for the future, and for, training your skills or building your business. And really, those two go into building the industry. I mean, the industry is made up of who we are. So, yeah, we'll get into that a little bit today, but let's start off. We got a couple pretty basic questions for you, Craig. The first one is, what's your favorite tree?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. Gosh, what's my favorite tree? I am totally stalling right now as I'm thinking. I think my answer is Magnolia grandiflora. Southern Magnolia, or evergreen magnolia.
Good choice.
Yeah, that's a good one. Nice.
That's not a usual answer from someone that lives in Seattle.
Why is that, Craig?
Why do I live in Seattle, or why?
No,
is
why? Yeah. Why do you live in Seattle?
What are you doing up there?
Why is that your favorite tree? Like, what characteristics about it?
They're so out of character for our region.
Yeah,
I love that it is a broadleaf evergreen.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I love that it flowers later in the year. They benefit from good care, particularly canopy reduction, canopy management.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
there's
important.
one down the street from me. Yeah, there's one down the street from me that I just love seeing. It's such a cool shape. I love the glossy dark green on the top surface of the leaf, and then underneath that sort of fuzzy coppery surface below. I find that contrast very interesting.
Yeah, those trees are really tricky when you're first learning how to prune, because of their growth pattern, how they elongate. you know, it can get tricky to find a place to cut them back to in a way that'll make the tree look uniform. You know, I've noticed people have trouble learning how to prune those ones sometimes.
They're really fun to climb, though.
Oh, yeah.
They're really easy. It's like a nice little ladder.
Yeah.
It really lends itself to.
And the smell. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, the smell's great.
Nice. That's a great answer.
Yeah, that's a good one. Solid.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Gold star. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
you
Gold
get-
star. Yeah, gold
Lightning,
star.
lightning
11 out of
round
10.
question
All right.
2.
So how did you get into tree work?
Ooh, how did I get into tree work? Let me think back. Rewinding the clock here. So God's honest truth here. I was in a totally different profession from when I got out of college until I was 35. And at the time, coincidentally, my wife and I ran a small company that did business consulting and sales training. This is not where you thought the answer was going,
No.
but bear with me.
Yeah, no, but that's great.
We were up in the mountains of Colorado in a place called Leadville, if anyone knows where that is, highest incorporated city in the continental U.S.
Nice.
And we were up there hanging out at this little inn and hostel. And we had been working our tails off. And when I did the math, I think we earned like $3.50 an hour for the last 2 years before that, just trying to build this company over a couple of years. And it was working, but it was killing us. And I seriously woke up Christmas morning. This was 2011. I woke up Christmas morning, turned to my wife in bed. It's still dark. It's like 5:30. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. She said, what? I said, I want to close the company. She said, you know, we both work there, right? And I said, yeah, I know, but I can't do this. I said, we either got to put more money and time in, and I don't have either, or we got to get out before we take on a bunch of debt. She's like, okay, well, you better figure something out. So anyway, it was Christmas Day. We went skiing. The next day, I had my laptop because I had my laptop with me everywhere because I was always working. And I'm sitting there at the kitchen table in the morning, and I seriously opened Craigslist. I went to the job ads, and I put in the word climb. And I hit search, and I read every job ad. And I found listings for arborists and arborist trainees. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I had previously read the book, The Wild Trees by Richard Preston. And if you haven't read that book, it's amazing.
It's a good one.
It's amazing. That was the first place, and I don't know what year I read that, maybe in like 2004. I don't know, I'm making up a year. And that was the first place I'd actually ever seen the word arborist. And it had kind of stuck with me. Cool book. And I read a bunch more stuff by Richard Preston. Super great writer. Super cool stuff. Anyhow, I saw this arborist trainee. I was like, that's interesting. I wonder how I learned to do that. So the next day, as I was reading through those ads again, I thought, I'm going to search for some companies. We were living in Denver at the time. I'm going to search for some companies, and I'm going to call them. And I'm just going to ask them what it is and how do you get into this. And I ended up talking to one guy by the name of Chris Toney, still know him, super cool guy, runs a small, really good tree company out of Boulder. And on December 27th, at like 4 p.m, he spent an hour on the phone with me, and I learned he was with his family in Cleveland or something for the holidays, and I couldn't believe it. And he said, well, hey, man, call me after the new year and come up and spend a half a day and shadow with us and see what this is all about. I was like, right on. So I started working on my resume, and I created sort of this outdoor, everything I could think of related to trees and whatnot. You know, I went to school for environmental science, mostly because I couldn't sit through business classes. I had always been an outdoor kid, and I got into rock climbing when I was 10. And I'd done a bunch of stuff. I was a ski patroller. I was a volunteer firefighter. I had my EMT credentials. I had done a bunch of outdoor stuff. I'd done some mountaineering. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make up sort of a non-work resume. I'm going to send this around to some tree jobs and see what comes out of it. And so I'm 35. I went to college. I was in a business field. My wife jokes that's our past life. I was suit guy. Now I'm tree guy. So suit guy is about to learn the hard way what tree work is all about. And so that was December, Christmas, New Year's 2011. And interestingly, my wife was looking at job ads one evening. She goes, "Hey, I found this one, arborist trainee. You ought to check it out. They're up in Golden." Okay. And on Friday the 13th, my favorite day of the year, I got hired for my first tree job with Schulhoff Tree and Lawn Care in Golden, Colorado. And I started work January 16th, the following Monday. And I learned an awful lot real quick. So anyway, long story long, that's how I got into it.
Oh, that's great. What
That's fantastic.
do you remember your first job?
To my first role in the company or my first tree job?
The first tree job when you first showed up at work and kind of what that was like.
Maybe. The first one that I remember being on was the removal of a Plains cottonwood in a backyard. Must have been in Golden or west side of Denver somewhere. And there were like 5 of us in this big ass chipper, and I didn't know anything about chippers at the time. I honestly had used a chainsaw one time before getting into this profession. And there's a guy up in the tree just bombing it, just burying us. And we are almost running to keep up with this giant stuff he's cutting out of the tree. He's making like 6-inch or 8-inch cuts, dropping 40-foot limbs in this backyard. We're running in, and 2 or 3 guys are trying to yard this through the gate, and somebody cutting it up, and a bunch of people yelling, and yeah.
Damn, he hazed you.
That was the first one I remember.
Yeah, no, that's great. For me, my first job, I remember it was a long day. We ended up, I was chipping it when it was dark out with a truck parked behind us with the headlights on the chipper. And I remember just being so tired and being like, what did I get into? Like, oh no. But, then just kept doing it and thinking like, well, if I can make it through this day, it's not going to get much worse than this. So yeah, that's great.
It's funny you mentioned that. I got to the end of my first week and I came home, and now I have to give a little backup. Because I'd been a volunteer firefighter and into rock climbing and whatnot, I had been into CrossFit. And so I was pretty fit getting into this. So it was from a sort of an endurance and muscular fitness level, I felt pretty good. Mm-hmm. But I came home and my arms were torn up from that week dealing with, thorny honey locusts and cottonwood with gnarly bark and a lot of green ash and all these things. I was just shredded from, the middle of the bicep down, because it's, Colorado, and you have a sunny day in the winter and you're getting down to short sleeves because you're, breaking ass trying to drag brush getting out of the backyard. And I was torn up. And my wife, Joanna, looks at me at the end of the week and goes, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" And I said, yes. And what I really meant was, I don't know.
Maybe you wear your suit jacket next time. It'll protect your arms.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. But yeah, that introduction to it.
I love that you found your job on Craigslist, because that's how I stumbled into tree climbing too. I was just perusing Craigslist and I saw a tree climber position, and I'm like, that sounds interesting. I would like to find out what that's all about.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
It's just such a random way to get into this industry, but I'm glad that somebody else shares that experience with me.
It's especially great because your name is Craig. And it's
Craig.
Oh, yeah. I wish it was my list.
It took everyone a minute. I think it actually wasn't funny, and that's why.
You're right. It wasn't funny.
Breaking my heart.
Well, since it's come up, I do want to give a shout out to the guys at Schulhoff, and Rob Smith, who I think is still there, was my supervisor here as our department manager, and he was extremely generous. And I'll tell you, you brought up mentoring earlier, Andrew.
Yeah.
He was a mentor to me, and he gave me as much rope as I could run with, figuratively speaking, and was willing to teach me, was willing to take a risk on, suit guy, right?
Yeah.
That didn't grow up in this profession. Seriously, I was 35 the first day I was doing tree work. Mm-hmm. And the guy in the tree was like 24. And other guys on the ground were like 21. So anyway, to Rob Smith, and I think Corey Clemenson's still there, and I think AJ Feuerstein's still there. I learned a lot from all those guys, and I want to give a shout out to them because I have a microphone.
Yeah,
That is
right
so
on.
good.
One of the best. He was a good climber, but he was one of the best like lower down guys I ever worked with. You could take a big top and you'd barely feel it. And it was the same story for him. It was a little later in life. He was an artist, and he was from England and he came here on vacation and he saw some people doing tree work. And I don't know exactly how old, but 30s, 35, somewhere in there is what I want to say. And sure enough, he's just like, I want to do that, and put his mind to it. Went back to England and got on with a crew there. And he's a great tree guy. He's doing pottery now. Hopefully he listens. Dave, shout out to the bloke, if you're listening. But it's never too late to start. I mean, I think one of the main things in this industry, one of the things that kind of sets it apart is you need the passion more than anything. You really need to kind of love tree work to do a good job. And, that if you respect it, then you'll, be thinking about safety, and you'll be thinking about all those things you need to think about. It's not rocket science. You can learn all that other stuff pretty quick. In my mind, it's about whether or not you are passionate and have the right attitude towards the work more than anything.
It's really the question, what you're getting at is passion, but how hard are you willing to work? And what we usually think of that meaning is physically. How hard are you willing to work? How deep are you going to go? How big a log are you going to carry? How much brush can you drag? How much pain can you take? And certainly there is some aspect of that in the physical sense of our profession. So it's interesting, we have a lot of cutting tools to make things smaller and lighter, and yet we carry heavy things. Putting that aside for a moment, this idea of how hard are you willing to work to learn, to grow, to improve yourself, to improve your crew, whether it's skills, safety, scientific knowledge, all those things. How hard are you willing to work? That's the only limitation on how far you're going to go.
Yeah. Yep. Just that putting the time in. There's no substitute for putting the time in. Yeah. That's for sure.
And I mean, you can go from being suit guy to having your own business in a matter of years, and that's obviously the result of a lot of hard work.
This suit guy thing's going to follow me.
You never should have said that.
That's going to be your new nickname. That's just the way it is.
I'm hoping that I've gotten to the point now where when you Google my name, the first thing that comes up is not my old LinkedIn profile. But if you do Google me, my wife is listening and laughing here, but if you do Google me, you might see a picture of Suit Guy out there.
Oh, great.
Oh, nice.
So
I will share one thought with you. Speaking of mentorship and learning and whatnot, and something that Rob Smith, the manager at Schulhoff, when I first started working there, maybe I was 2 weeks in, week and a half. At the end of the day, he gives me this book, and he gave me the book Arboriculture, Integrated Management of Landscape Trees, Shrubs, and Vines by Harris, Clark, Matheny, and Harris. I'll say it one more time. Arboriculture, Integrated Management of Landscape Trees, Shrubs, and Vines by Harris, Clark, Matheny, and Harris. It's one of the Bibles of our profession. And this, I don't remember, but this book is like 900 pages. This thing is huge. And he gave it to me and he said, I think you might want this. And it was his copy. And I seriously spent the next 9 months reading that book.
Oh, wow.
Where I was living and where I worked were 25 miles away. So I'd get up in the morning and to beat traffic, I'd drive out to Golden early. I'd be a half hour early. I'd stop at a coffee shop and I'd sit down there and I'd start reading through the book. And it's soil structure and macro and micronutrients and pruning methods and insects, pests, and diseases, and all these things that at the time meant almost nothing to me. But I think about that book and the fundamental knowledge that sort of stuck in my brain that I'm finally connecting the dots on year after year after year. And it was a slog. No offense to the authors. It was a slog getting through that because I wasn't quite ready for it.
Really,
but
with a title like that, it sounds like
started
such
me in the right place. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like reading an OSHA manual, but it's all pertinent to what we do, and it was such an incredible foundation and Rob Smith gave me his copy of the book. I read it. I gave it back to him 9 months later. I was like, that was really good. Thank you. He's like, you read the whole thing? Oh, yeah, of course I read the whole thing. But it was a really good investment of time, even though sometimes I was just pushing to get through it because I didn't have all the context. Mm-hmm. But over time, all the pieces are fitting together, and I'm getting ready to take my board certified master arborist exam, and I think about that darn book all the time.
Oh, that's so great. It's really, that sets you up with such a great foundation, and I wonder, so I'm kind of the opposite end. I grew up in a family with tree guys. I was, when I was 10 years old, I was climbing on a Blake's hitch in my backyard. My stepdad was showing me how to do it. Yeah, very lucky. And I, got in, and I was lucky to be on a great crew as soon as I could work in the field. And I think there's something to be said for first getting into it when you're a little older and a little more mature. And, you have the maturity to say, I'm going to digest this book, even though it's not a fun read. For me, it was the opposite. I just kind of learned on the go and, worked in the field and picked up information. And hey, I'm not complaining. I loved how I got where I'm at and am grateful for it. But I don't know, getting in with that foundation is just awesome to me.
How hard are you willing to work, right?
Yeah.
And we come at it from different perspectives. You were 10 learning to climb. I was 35.
Yeah.
I was married. I had a mortgage. I guess I still have both. I am married. My wife is listening. and I very quickly realized, I think it took me about one day, maybe half a day, to realize I was not going to be able to drag brush very long and either A, survive, or B, pay the bills. I had to find a way to make a place for myself. And the only way I was going to do it was through knowledge. I was going to learn as much as I could, both the skill and the science of it, and I was going to earn every opportunity I possibly could, because I honestly had to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. I had just put both of us out of work, remember? I put my wife and I both out of work on Christmas, more or less, and I got to make up for that. And that was the motivation that drove me, and I think in many ways still does.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you progress, in this industry, is taking it on yourself to learn as much as you can, And something I kind of think of is, I think in Europe, I don't know much about this, like where at, but I feel like you have to go to school to be an arborist, right? Like it's a profession. Whereas here, it's still a little bit cowboy, You can answer a Craigslist ad and get a job, You could call around random tree companies and just start working. I know we sent you some like pre-interview stuff, and that was something you kind of wanted to talk about, was arboriculture as a profession, not just a job. So if you want to, elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, I want to recognize somebody who has contributed a lot to our profession and who left us last year. Some of you may know the name Desiree Litchfield. Desiree lived in Sweden, though he wasn't Swedish. He was South African and has lived all over the world. And as I heard the story, when Desiree started his company, it was the first company to use the term and the introduction of the term arborist in the Swedish language.
Wow.
And I had the opportunity to get to know Desiree over the last 4 or 5 years through climbing competitions down in Latin America and Mexico, and then at the North American and International Championships. And he invited me to come over and volunteer at the European Championships, and my wife and I got to spend some time with him in Sweden 2 years ago now, 2019 July. And we learned later that year that Desiree was very ill, and unfortunately he passed early in 2020. Mm-hmm. He did so much for this profession, whether it was volunteering his time, contributing to the body of knowledge, inventing equipment, including the ring and ring friction saver. He was involved in that invention. No matter what you hear from other companies.
Wow.
And he is someone who has influenced many, many arborists around the world and shared his time, energy, knowledge, and passion for arboriculture with so many people. And the reason I want to acknowledge him, one, is he was a giant in this profession, but two, he's the one who continually would say to me, anytime I used the word industry, he would say, it's not an industry, it's a profession.
Okay.
And as we were, Andrew, you sent me a great list of questions, and you spurred me to look up the word profession. And I hope Desiree is listening from somewhere, because God darn it, I looked up what the definition of it is of a profession. And if I might share two of them that I found.
Please do.
Yeah.
One of them, the Oxford Languages, which is, I guess, the group of dictionaries, says a profession is a paid occupation, especially one that involves prolonged training and a formal qualification. Well, that sure seems to describe an arborist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
No,
And then I found one from the Australian Council of Professions. And I have no idea what that is. But it sounds very
It sounds-
governmental.
Sounds official.
Sounds
Yeah.
kind of
It's official.
It sounds very official. But I really like this little short paragraph, and if I might read it to you. I have not memorized these. I'm reading them. It says, a profession is a disciplined group of individuals who adhere to ethical standards and who hold themselves out as and are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge and skills in a widely recognized body of learning derived from research, education, and training at a high level, and who are prepared to apply this knowledge and exercise these skills in the interest of others. That stuck with me.
Yeah, that resonates really. It makes me feel really special.
That is fantastic. And I've fallen into that same. I use industry and profession interchangeably, but I will never call the tree care industry tree care industry anymore. It's tree care profession. That's incredible.
It's a profession, and the idea of, or the concepts of training, qualification, research, education, and the idea of applying all of those, that skill set in the interest of others. That definition would make Desiree proud. And that is something I aspire to be and something that I want to share with others.
Yeah. Well, I think you do share that with others. Before talking to you, getting ready for this, one of the things that stood out, kind of thinking back as, about our brief interactions was at competitions and how on point you were with making sure the gear was dialed in exactly. But more than just that, you would take the time to explain why things needed to be the way they were. And that really stuck out to me. And I think that goes along with kind of the difference maybe between like kind of the thought of an industry and a profession. The industry is you're just doing it. The profession is you're educating the people around you and kind of making everybody better through doing it. I don't know. That's awesome.
I feel like the profession, not the industry, the profession is getting better, but what are some things you think are like holding it back right now?
Now you open the door.
Yeah.
Here we go.
A can of
Couple of
worms.
thoughts. I told you might actually hear what I really think.
Oh, we're ready.
Yeah, bring it.
Well, as I said to you early on, I stand by what I say, and I'll own my words if people disagree. And I'm wide open to a conversation. I think disagreement and discussion is essential to our democracy and essential to the growth of us as individuals.
Absolutely.
So here we go. A couple of little beefs that I have around things that are holding us back. And one of them is that pictures of removing trees look cool. Big saws and knuckle booms and rigging and sawdust flying and huge chippers and grapple trucks. That stuff is all cool. It's all cool. And there are plenty of trees that need to come down. I just looked at a western hemlock this afternoon that has an obvious decay column the entire height. It's got large woodpecker holes. It's significant dieback, and it leans over the fence into the neighbor's yard. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of trees that need to come down, but there are so many that are just just slaughtered here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm going to give you an example. I probably mentioned to you, or you know this, that I was a contract climber for a couple of years as I was getting my own business started. And I learned quickly there were some companies I wanted to contract with and others maybe not so much. And one of the jobs that just broke me on tree removal, just broke me, it kind of soured me on contract climbing, or at least changed my perspective, was outside the city, out in a suburb that's a little bit notorious for disappearing trees. And I was there on the second day of a job to remove a Doug fir. Oh, I meant to mention this earlier. Let's be clear in our language. Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menziesii, right?
Correct.
Precision of language.
Yes.
All right. A fir could mean so many things. So let's, as arborists, be professional
Be specific.
and use professional terms, right?
Yeah.
Be specific. So Pseudotsuga menziesii, a Douglas fir, in a backyard, nothing wrong with it. I just happened to be the one who had the skill to rig down the limbs over the house.
Mm-hmm.
The tree was 30-something inches diameter and 120 feet tall. It was the fourth tree of that size that was being removed off of a quarter-acre lot in 2 days. So in 2 days, 600 vertical feet of healthy native conifer was removed from a suburban lot for no reason other than they wanted more light to their yard.
Oh.
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of places in the country that have plenty of sunlight and very few trees.
Yeah.
And the Seattle area ain't one of them.
Yeah, the PNW is
And
not.
what I'm getting at is, why were those trees removed? One, because the property owner wanted to turn it into somewhere else, which is why we have tree protection codes, except that suburb does not. And two, a company that holds themselves out as an arborist service said, yeah, sure, we'll cut them down. And I'm still pissed about that.
Yeah.
And I showed up the second day to cut down the fourth tree because I had the skills to do it. And I felt like the biggest effing tool. I'm still sickened by that job.
Yeah.
I'm sure most of us have kind of had a job like that.
Oh, yeah.
We've all had those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you asked me what's holding us back. One, cutting down trees is profitable.
Mm-hmm.
The pictures look cool. The tools are cool, right? Big
Right.
saws. Oh, yeah, big saws.
I feel like
Right?
you can
Big
use
chipper.
toys and tools interchangeably in this,
Yeah.
in this sense.
I wish we didn't, but we can.
Yeah.
And so here's another thing. What do I want to call it? I'm going to call it tree porn. Use that, right? You've heard the term like horn porn for hunting magazines or ski porn for ski magazines.
Yeah.
So this is tree porn. And the catalogs and the industry publications that use the word tree care on the cover, I'm not naming names, but it says tree care among other words on the cover.
I think
And
I know.
almost every month, the cover photo is someone cutting down a tree. The most recent one was an issue focused on women in arboriculture. And you know what that said on the cover by the photo? Women cut down trees too. I love the idea of women in arboriculture.
Yeah.
Women are a lot smarter than men. They can bring a lot to this profession.
You heard
But
him.
showcasing that women cut down trees too is a disservice to this entire profession.
Yeah.
I told you you'd hear what I really think.
So, okay, then what do you say? Because this is what, this is the excuse I always hear is, well, the tree's going to come down anyways. Somebody's going to make money off of it. And, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. I fully agree with you that is not a good excuse. But what do you tell somebody when they say that?
I have said that to myself before.
Yeah, I have too.
I have said that to myself before.
I don't
So
think it's a
here's my
good thing to
thought.
say, but it's the easy thing to say.
So I used to say to people, and I'm answering a different question, but I'll get around to what you're asking. I used to say to people, I'm excited because I have a career that allows me to go out and climb trees every day. And I've learned that the most important thing I do is explain trees. I spend time every day explaining trees to people, and I often climb them afterward. And part of explaining trees is helping the homeowner, property owner, tree manager understand the trees on their property, the value they provide, the risks they may or may not present, and how to understand what they have heard from other tree companies. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is that tree is sick.
Yeah.
How many of us have gone out to look at a tree and you get there and they say, oh yeah, we talked to somebody else. I want you to look at this one back here. They said the tree is sick.
Yep.
I'm immediately skeptical of whoever they've talked to.
Yeah.
Because anyone in this field realizes that the tree is sick means nothing. Right?
Yep.
It's like if your dentist said, oh, that tooth is bad. We should take it out.
Yeah.
How good would you feel about a dentist if they said your tooth was bad? Right? That's like saying a tree is sick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you look and you go, oh, you mean this pitch, this resin on the backside? Yeah. Or, oh, that dead limb up there? Well, let's talk about what that means relative to the tree's condition, what it might or might not indicate, what is the risk associated with that, and what are your choices for managing this tree on your property.
And I'd probably
Our
say
role as arborists is first to explain trees.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd say 80% of the time when someone asks, "Hey, is this tree dying? Look at that deadwood." The answer is it's just being shaded out. Those are just branches the tree doesn't need anymore. Nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
That's the answer most of the time for me when I see that.
Yeah, how often is it that you go out to a tree and it's actually worse than what the homeowner thinks it is?
Yeah.
It's really pretty rare, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this in the bidding episode too, people's, what was it we were referring it, like their risk tolerance.
Yeah, risk tolerance
is really, really low.
Well, and that's hard because what happens is, an arborist without the morals to the tree
Or knowledge.
or knowledge,
Yeah, that's true.
they start selling the fear.
Mhm.
And so they, because it's easy to sell fear, and that puts the next person, if that's somebody that cares about the tree, in a hard position. Because then you're not just trying to educate him, but you're also battling fear, which is one of those most primal decision-making emotions that we have.
Yeah, I also kind of feel though it's just as easy to kind of educate yourself and your clients and your cohorts,
Yeah.
and then not take that approach.
Yep.
And everyone and everything is better that way.
Yep.
It is.
Well,
Something that's reassuring.
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Gotcha.
It reminds me of a bid that me and Jamie did.
Uh-huh.
Remember those big redwoods?
Right. Yeah.
It was an apartment complex that I've worked with them in the past, and we had just taken down honestly a beautiful Oregon white oak. But I agreed to take it down, and at first I told them I wasn't interested, but they wanted it removed because the roots were just destroying concrete on a couple sides and growing into a pool. And they actually had the cement shaved down for years now, and they had kind of done everything to the point where the concrete guy was like, "Hey, the only thing you can do is like move the pool, or you need to remove this tree," And so because they had worked for 4 or 5 years and done everything they could to save the tree, I was like, "All right, I'll work with you on this tree." But then they called me back, a month or so later to look at these big redwood trees, coastal redwoods, beautiful trees. They were pretty big trees also.
Yeah.
And I just said, nope. And it was lifting up a garage, and we were like, here is what you can do. And I actually didn't say no. And this is something that I've started doing, because if you just say no, they say, okay, we're done, and they're on to the next one. But I said, it's going to be so expensive for you to hire me to remove those trees that it's not going to be worth it. It would be more, it'd make more sense financially for you to fix the foundation and prune the roots on these redwoods. And so I tried to steer the conversation away from the removal, instead of just saying no, because if I say no, they're still thinking removal.
Yeah, well, they were worried about the tree leaning too. It had to.
Yeah, but it wasn't a factor.
No, it's not. It usually isn't.
Tree lean is like the single biggest killer of any kind of tree.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
But that's also why you have the conversation, because then you're building the relationship. And if you have a relationship with them, then they'll listen to you. Then all of a sudden you can battle the fear.
Yeah.
Because they trust you, and that's how you beat fear, is with trust.
Yeah, we recommended like
Very well said.
air spading and maybe a little root pruning and fixing the foundation, right?
Yeah. We were like, these trees are worth more than that garage.
You're bringing up great examples, and are there trees that need to be removed? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
My concern is exactly what you've described, and the idea of being a tool, right? And the tool is when the client says, I'm worried about it. I think we should cut it down. My neighbor said it's sick. Or the best is the roofer or the landscaper or the asphalt guy or the electrician next door said that tree looks sick. How much to cut it down? And somebody, unfortunately, too many buddies say, $2,400.
Yeah.
That's being a tool.
Well, yeah, and it
Don't
happens.
just show up and say, what do you want me to do? Oh, me cut tree. Yes. How much? 24. Great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
That's not doing anybody a service. That is not using knowledge, skill, and experience for the benefit of others. It's being a tool.
Yeah, kind of leads back into something I think we did want to cover too, is training, and how ethics sometimes is missing from the training. You get like someone that's an awesome climber teaches you how to climb, and you're really good at climbing, or someone who's really an experienced sawyer teaches you everything about chainsaws, and you're great. But there's sometimes you have to find just the right person to kind of teach you about like the biological and the benefits of trees, or all the ethical components that go into this profession. And I guess if you wanted to talk a little bit about that too, like how do we mitigate that in moving forward, for people who are new, or just the direction that we're going with all this?
Yeah. Becca, are you in charge of keeping us on topic?
I'm trying.
Excellent. I like it. It's a great question, and there's so many things that go into it. And let's start with one thought, which is, if we have individuals in this profession who are up in the tree and don't understand tree biology, and they are making cuts on the tree, I think we have people who are underprepared for doing that task. And you are exactly right. Training must include the science side as well as the skill and implementation side. And how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? And that's one of, I think, our big challenges. And I suspect that it's related to what I'm going to call a gap in the organizational structure of most small to mid-sized tree companies. And I'll define that as 1 crew to probably 4 crews. 1 crew to 4 crews, something like that. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're putting between 2 and 12 people in the field. And the gap is the crew leader, trainer, safety specialist role. Some people call it a field supervisor. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So let's look at the career path of somebody in this profession, and let's assume they have an interest to climb. So they show up, they come in on the ground, right? They're the groundie, the grounds person, the branch manager, the doctor of drag, whatever you want to call them, right? And they earn their time. I almost said earn your spurs.
You're proving
they
spurs.
earn their time. They earn their time, their opportunity, drag and brush. All right, that's fine. And then they have a chance to climb. And we all know that some people find that climbing not for them, but other people take to it. So they become a climber. They get to climb occasionally, and then they're the back climber with the bucket truck, and then they're a lead climber, then they're the foreman on their own crew. And in a company of, let's say there's 2 crews or 3 crews, you're the foreman there, and you get your certified arborist. Maybe you get your CTSP, your certified tree care safety professional, which is a really cool program if you haven't done it yet. You get your CTSP, and you're with that company 5 years, 7 years. Maybe you've been there 10 years now. What comes next? Mm-hmm. What is the career path? Where can he or she go? Well, the company already has an owner. and there's nobody between the owner and you. You got two choices. You stay or you go. And what happens with people who are motivated, who are, one of my favorite terms, an autodidact, someone who is self-educating, somebody who pursues knowledge, somebody who's motivated, who continues to lift their skill and knowledge level? What do? They either go find a bigger company where there's a middle management type, leadership, field role. They start their own company, or they become a contract climber. And there aren't that many middle management safety training roles out there. It's a really small opportunity. So most of them go start their own company. And that's part of the reason we have a million small companies and we repeat the problem again. The career path is so limited. Groundsperson, climber, maybe bucket operator, aerial lift operator, crew leader, maybe. And then what? Do you have to become an entrepreneur? Do you have to go start your own company or become a contract climber? And there's this brain drain that happens.
Yeah.
Because once you know enough, there's nowhere to go. So you go do your own thing.
So
and it happens over and over.
How do we convince, or how do we make it profitable for companies to take the time to take that guy that's right about to take that next step and, get him track certified and, maybe put him in charge of hiring or put him in charge of gear purchase or give them a responsibility where they can earn a little bit more money, they can educate, they can bring value to your company? Like, what does that look like, do you think?
A couple of thoughts. And it goes back to pruning versus removals. And correct me if you feel differently, but it's my observation and the observation of others from larger companies who see profit and loss sheets with more data than mine has, that tree preservation, tree pruning, cabling, plant healthcare, those kinds of services are more profitable than tree removal because there's way more competition for tree removal. Anybody can buy a chainsaw. So part of the answer to that is transitioning companies to do more tree preservation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which drives more revenues and even better, more profit in the business and creates a better financial climate within the company to invest in the growth and development of employees.
Yeah, there's like more skill sets.
Also,
go ahead.
Exactly. And it's also less physical labor oriented. So the career path is longer. You lose fewer people to injuries or thinking better of dragging brush every day or carrying heavy logs, right? We lose a whole bunch of people that get out of this profession because of the physical demands, typically related with tree removal. And we can, with companies with a better balance between tree preservation and removal, the financial climate is better, the working environment is better, the opportunity to provide more training, more learning, more growth, whether it's growing the company or growing employee opportunities, is better. I think that's one part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, creating those opportunities within a company for someone to move up. Because I think, so my family business that I worked in for 18 years and worked every position more or less I could in the company before I went to the city. That's how they do it. They try to set it up so that, once you've got a certain level, you become a crew leader. And then once you become a crew leader and you've, proven yourself as a crew leader, they start giving you other responsibilities and giving you pay as those responsibilities come. And they hire, they try to hire people and just train them the whole way so that the people that are there know the way the companies run and they do everything within, as a team, which has been successful. But it's a company that has grown over the years. So it's probably a 4 or 5 crew, it's right above that level that you're talking about. So they can. That's the tricky part, is how do you grow the company to that level where you can do that? Because I think when you're first starting out in the tree world, you kind of, those removals are your bread and butter for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what he brought up, preservation versus removals. There's more job opportunities in preservation because there's things like, oh, you could be like the plant healthcare specialist. You know, that's kind of this job role you can grow into if you learn enough. You know, we can put you in that role. You could be the cabling, bracing, you know,
totally
building supports person.
Yep. And that's the way to do it.
Air spading. Like there's so many different things than rigging and felling. And
well, and then you can also go, it gives a place, you know, when you start expanding to get out of the field, because then you can become the person that writes the reports and does the track, you know, stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is, 2 thumbs up, man. Mm-hmm. Like smiling ear to ear hearing this. But I think there is a point of the in between. You know, the 2-person crew to the, you know, or the 2 field employees to the, you know, 10 field employees. There's like this weird in between space where it's hard to cover that gap.
Right.
You know, and I don't think it's impossible, because like Sperry, my family's company, has always tried to be, you know, we were the first company in town that was, you know, Sperry tree care instead of, you know, tree cutting. You know, so they always had that in mind. But even being that company, the truth is, for a while, removals were the bread and butter of the company. And we always would try to talk people out of removing trees that didn't need to be removed and do that. But I think that's still, there is a hard point there where you're, you know, when you're clawing and scraping to survive as a company and your competition is selling these removals, man, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, or
it is. It is.
Turnover too. Like maybe you're a small company and you're the owner, so you're having to do all of those things that we, you know, just talked about. You're out writing the reports. You're the plant healthcare specialist. All sorts of stuff, because you don't have employees sticking around long enough because you know, they get to a certain level and go off on their own, or it's not for them. We have a high turnover rate in this profession, I think. You know.
Yeah. Why do you think people leave? What do you think the big reasons are that people leave a job with a particular tree company?
I think some people, it's just not for them, and that's pretty quick. You know, you figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then probably pay is a big one too.
Well, I think too, like the plateau factor, like what Craig was talking about, you get to a certain point where you're not growing in any way, and you don't attain any more responsibilities, or, you know, you just kind of max out at a certain point, and the only higher position you could have would be to own the company, and it's not yours. So.
I would think that there's a certain leadership component to it as well. You know, you have all these tree care, or you have all these climbers who are phenomenal climbers, right? Being a phenomenal climber does not make you a good businessman, and it does not make you necessarily a good leader. I've known some really great climbers who were terrible leaders. You know, I mean, they can you know, chuck brush with the best of them, or, you know, chop down a tree with the best of them, but they're not great leaders. They're burying their groundsmen, and, you know, everybody on the ground hates them because
they made a salad.
Yeah, they made a salad out of the tree.
They're out there screaming at them like, "Hurry up, fuck!"
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, there's certainly a leadership aptitude component, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back to the pay subject you mentioned, and this isn't about how much we pay, but I would encourage us to use another word.
Okay.
You know, putting on my suit guy hat here.
Here he comes.
Yeah, putting on the suit guy hat.
It's what the industry needs, is a little suit guy.
We need a little suit guy now and then.
Yeah.
In most other professions, the term that would be used is compensation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not just pay.
Yeah.
Right? If we view this as a job with pay, we could be digging ditches, we could be doing anything, right? That is a job, and I pay you to do a job. Compensation represents something much larger. And what could compensation include? Hey, it could include professional development. It could include education. It could include all kinds of things that advance the well-being, the financial stability, and the professional opportunities for that employee. And if we use the word compensation, I think that encourages us to see the interaction between an employee and an employer differently. There's a great quote and I cannot tell you who it's from, but it says, if you didn't learn something today, you missed out on half your compensation.
Nice. I really like that you brought that up.
When I think about a role at a company being employed, there's a few things that I would want. One is there's got to be money. I get that. There has to be a wage, a salary, whatever it might be. But there has to be the opportunity to learn and grow, because I don't want to be doing the same thing in 5 years that I'm doing today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be doing something different. And I realize that unless I am learning, I'm not going anywhere. And I hear so often that, it's hard to find people. It's hard to find people. And at the same time, it's hard to keep people. It's hard to keep people.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect it's because, or a reason for it, is that as employers, I put myself in that role, we could do better in terms of providing a broader type of compensation or a broader range of compensation, including professional development for our employees. Because we tend to think of what is they can do for me, what can they do for me, and I give them money. You work hard, I pay you. Okay, that's great, sure, but where is this going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what if instead we said, hey, this guy, I'm going to pick a name, Keith, right? Keith does some work for me. He's pretty good. He's got some aptitude. He's motivated. Where could Keith go? How high can Keith go? Well, he's got some aptitude. He's got some education. He's got physical skill. He's got some talent for climbing. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I wonder if he can learn this. Hey, Keith, you want to go next month? There's a class here. You want to go? Sure. And six months down the road, hey, there's another one. Do you want to go? Yeah, sure. And then Keith comes to me and says, hey, I'd like a little more pay. And I say, okay, let's see where we're at. Okay, I can do part of that. How about next year we set aside a budget for training, and we'll get you to this many training programs, and I can give you a little bit extra pay and when you complete those. Hey, sure, great. And now all of a sudden Keith has gone to track, and he's gone to an aerial lift operators training, and he has attended this and attended that. And he comes back and he says, look, boss, I did all these things. Yep, and I see you doing those in the field. It's easy to pay you more money now because you're doing more for the company.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we have this two-way street of compensation where the employee is gaining and growing. And guess what? The employer is gaining and growing at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we tend to think of what can our employees do? But what if we said instead, what could we accomplish with a group of badass arborists?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do we take who we have and build them up to that? And we go crush it.
Oh, yeah.
That's the plan.
I know those companies are out there. You know, I got lucky enough. The first company I was on, the owner was all about like sending me to trainings and stuff. I happened to move towns. That's why I left. Otherwise, I would definitely still be working with them, you know, plenty of room for growth and everything. So that's interesting. If you're new to the industry, tree people are hiring, you know, you can find those companies that are going to invest in you, you know, and in return, you'll be investing in their company.
Yep. And
Well said.
I think I think one of the problems that I've seen is that when the skills it takes to start a company and to get a company from 2 people to 10 people, I think are different skills than it takes to build it from there. You know, because I think to get the company off the ground, it takes that I'm going to do everything I can do and I'm going to make it happen. But what we're talking about now is not I'm going to do everything I'm going to do, but it's how can I delegate these responsibilities really in a way that I'm taking some of those responsibilities off of my plate, which is hard for somebody who's just spent 5 or 10 years making sure they did everything just the way they wanted to do it. And then now they have a successful company. So the reward for them is I did it this way and that brought me success. So I think it's hard for them to then shift gears, you know, and start delegating like that. That's a problem I've seen people have to kind of fight with as their companies grow. And I think that might be kind of what you're getting at a little bit is or I guess what we're getting at with this conversation is there's this interesting place where companies have to learn how to shift and almost use different skills because really one person can only manage so many people effectively, you know.
Oh, the span of control. Do you know that term?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the span of control? Who can define that?
It's how many?
I heard some yeses.
How many? It's how many people one person can manage.
Like one person can only manage 5 people. So for every 5-person team, there should be.
So we took this really boring federal. What was that class?
FEMA.
This FEMA class.
Yeah.
This
Hey man, I love that class. I love every second of that class.
I'm glad you did.
Gross.
So I may not have retained that definition exactly.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Craig, with the definition.
You guys all said yes. I don't know.
I know the
You're exactly
overall
right, though.
concept.
It comes out of organizational structures, and U.S. government, military, other large organizations, fire services have identified that a leader can manage effectively between 3 and 7 people.
Okay.
And that's why the fundamental sort of unit organization of many large companies, militaries, whatever it might be, is this small unit that has typically about 5 people. And once you get beyond that, you really start to lose touch with you, lose your ability to manage, guide, nurture, train, develop, whatever term you want to use. You lose your ability to do that. So let's go back to our scale. 1 crew, 2 crews, boop, there's our 5.
Yep.
Now, what do we see so often? We see there's a company owner, and now he or she wants to add a 3rd crew or a 4th crew, and the ability to manage all that goes down quickly. And we're based on the concepts of span of control. For every 2 or 3 crews, we really need a mid-level manager person, somebody to fulfill that role. Maybe it's a full-time job, maybe it's not. But the owner can no longer manage everybody and develop everybody effectively. When you get beyond that, it's just too hard.
Oh,
And it goes back to Becca's training question. How do we get better? We have to have companies that are set up effectively to manage, train, develop people.
yeah. Yeah. So when I was running crews at Sperry, it was at a point where the company was kind of going up and down and growing, and then the recession hit, so we had to shrink. And so I think that's part of the reason people have a hard time, because when you're in that kind of ebb and flow stage of building a company, there would be one point where we'd be down to 4 or 5 people, and that was always easy for me to manage. 4 or 5, we had usually 2 crews, 1 or 2 crews depending on the situation, and that's no problem. You get the work orders, it's easy to figure out whose skills go where and do it. But then when we grow up to 10, 12, 13, 14 people, then it was overwhelming. Mm-hmm. You're trying to manage 4 crews, and figure out all these different personalities, who works good with who. And so that, I think we're keying in on one of the big problems in growth right now. But all you got to do is figure out how, if you can have those main leaders that you can trust to assign and have that structure figured out. As you grow, you build that structure rather than growing and just trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? It's about having that plan in advance. So as it happens, you can put it in place, I think.
It's easier to put the framework up first and then the building versus the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Have a plan for it.
So here's another factor that goes in there. And I think entrepreneurship, starting small businesses, is something that's it's a really strong part of our American culture. We're a culture that celebrates entrepreneurship. And I like that. I've benefited from that. I'm the 3rd generation in a row of entrepreneurs in my family, and somehow that just dawned on me the other day. But what's interesting about our profession is that in most areas, the barrier to entry is so low that anybody can start a tree company.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You need a pickup truck and a chainsaw.
Let me be very clear. I am not in favor of protectionist policies, right? I'm not trying to say that. But rather, many of you know Phil Kelly. That's a name a lot of people know. And Phil likes to say, all you need to be an arborist in Seattle is a pickup truck and a business license, and you can probably get away without the pickup truck. The idea is that you don't have to have any credentials, no credentials whatsoever related to the profession of arboriculture to start a tree service business in the state of Washington.
In the state of Oregon as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing here. Matter of fact,
I'm going to guess it's almost all 50 states.
Yep.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
It's probably something like that, right?
Right.
And that leads to all kinds of interesting things. And I'm going to say something that may be a little bit controversial, but in order to be successful, in order to grow, in order to hire the right people, train them, equip them properly, bring in specialists as needed to have a functioning, successful business that grows, as we've been talking about, it takes profitability.
Yeah.
It takes profitability. And what is one of the big challenges? Getting back to our tree removal, somebody's going to cut it down conversation. If all you need is the cheapest insurance you can buy, a business license from the state, and a chainsaw to go out and sell your services cutting down trees, putting aside the ones who are unlicensed, uninsured. But if that's all it takes, of course it's going to be hard to be profitable, to compensate people well, to invest in equipment and training, and to grow a business in that climate.
Yep.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And
There's
so
there's
what
no
can we
way
do about
around
it,
it,
right?
Yeah.
Becca's going to get us back on topic.
I'm here to reel it in.
What can we do about it?
Well,
I've got some good friends who work for the city of Denver, and one of the things Denver's implemented, and pardon me if I misspeak, is you need to be licensed as a tree care provider in the city of Denver. So you have to have a certified arborist on staff.
yep.
Yeah. And I think they're moving toward you have to have a certified tree worker or be able to pass some sort of a skills test to show you can actually do the work safely.
Oh, what's up, Denver?
Yeah. Shout out.
What an idea,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What an idea. Rather than just saying any Tom, Dick, and Harry or Sally with a chainsaw can be a tree service company. What if we had a standard?
Yeah.
yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah.
So I feel really fortunate because I'm in somewhat of an apprenticeship right now with one of the companies that I work for, and it's great because this company's main focus is on tree preservation. And
Ooh.
yeah, I know. And so it's really great because I've always been more, into not removing trees, and as like you were saying earlier, the pictures are cool. I get it. Like, it's a lot more glamorous and badass and whatever looking, right? But it is great. And I learned last week how to fertilize a tree, and learned how to do a dynamic cable, and all the while getting a lot of good climbing experience and things like that. Anyways, 1000% super grateful. Shout out to Nate. Thank you. But I feel really just lucky that I ended up in this situation. And I feel like if everyone that got into this had an opportunity to be in an apprenticeship with a company that does what Nate does, or what you do, Craig, kind of focus more on the scientific and like the actual tree preservation aspect, the scientific educational benefits of trees aspect of this profession, then I think things would be a lot different. We wouldn't end up even, having conversations like, well, there's just like someone with a chainsaw that and then I think things would be a lot different in the scheme of what we do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there are so few apprenticeship programs right now. A few companies have them. And there are a number of community colleges or four-year institutions that now offer urban forestry, arboriculture programs, but they're not very many. Is Clackamas Community College still running their program down in Oregon?
I took track last year, and they came in and announced that they were doing it. Maybe that was 2 years ago. So it's pretty recent. I imagine they're doing it.
Yeah.
Still.
I probably would have heard if
Yeah.
it was shutting down. I haven't heard that.
I don't know for sure.
But it's true. There's not a lot, especially on the West Coast. I know on the East Coast, you know, at UMass, you can go to college for arboriculture. I've known a couple of people go through that program and come out just top level arborists.
And as a matter of fact, Massachusetts, I believe you have to have a Massachusetts license to operate as an arborist.
Yeah, and I want to say New Jersey, maybe. You know, I think the East Coast is a little bit ahead of the game with some of this stuff.
Well, that's exactly the thing. It's like, it's not like there's no federal blanket or like a blanket over the whole of arboriculture that, you know, there's a lack of a standard, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of what's acceptable and what isn't. And we mentioned this before.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up, Becca.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we talked about this before about, like, you know, how people who are retired surgeons don't do surgery out of their garage. But, like, people who are retired loggers can just be like, yeah, I'll do it for $150. And, like, people will they're way more perceptive to that. And it's just like, you know, discount dentist telling you have a bad tooth, you know?
Yeah. And it's a mentality. I mean, to be willing to go out there. You know, when I started at the city, you know, I kept getting people wanting to do work, and so I started doing it on the weekend. And I remember pretty much right off, I went and got insurance and got everything I needed to be above the board. Because there's nothing worse in my mind than that conversation where you're like, well, you know, I'm good at it. I'm not going to drop anything on your house, but just so you know, I'm not insured. You know, like, you just feel that doesn't feel right. That's not how you, as a professional, as a member of this profession, that is not an acceptable conversation. You know.
Yeah, you're bringing up great points, all of you. There's so many things that go into it, and it's standards, it's regulations, it's certification, qualification, licensure, in proper insurance, all these kinds of things. And can you imagine if you didn't have to have those things to be an attorney or to be a doctor or name any of those?
Yeah,
name any of those. So you're hitting on good things. And speaking of standards, a little point worth mentioning is that I understand OSHA is in process of developing a tree care standard, a vertical standard for the tree care industry. Okay. Yeah, well, there's process moving forward. Peter Gerstenberger did a terrific presentation on it at the ISA International Conference that was, December, January, the virtual conference. Oh, nice. Super great presentation if you had a chance to see it.
Could you see a lot being borrowed from the rope access industry, you know? From that?
I certainly haven't read the standard. I haven't seen any draft for it. I think there will be some elements. Remember our agreement, Andrew, is we're not going down the tree climbing conversation here.
Yep.
Sorry, that was Jamie.
We're not making this about climbing trees. Increasing safety standards is to everyone's benefit.
Yeah.
Everyone's benefit.
Yep.
So I'd like to briefly touch on something that I kind of see as a hurdle to us kind of standardizing everything. When I bring up these things, and when I have talked to other professionals in other industries like lawyers or doctors or anything, there's definitely a stigma. You know, you say, hey, you know, I do these continued educations, and, you know, board certified master arborist, you know, I liken that to like a doctor, and they look at you funny and they're like, they're not a doctor. There's no way they're a doctor. And a board certified master arborist, you're going through the process right now, right? I mean, where does that rate? Like what level of education goes into that? Like hour wise?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would tell you I would avoid trying to make the equivalency with being a doctor.
Oh, absolutely.
I think you're asking for trouble on that one.
Absolutely, and I'm not trying to equate them to doctors, but when you,
I would say it's the highest internationally recognized standard in the arboriculture profession, outside of academic being a doctor of, like Dr. Ed Gilman, right? As opposed, you know, outside of the academic world. It's the highest qualification for a working arborist available and recognized worldwide. That's what a BCMA, a board certified master arborist, represents.
Right. And even when I bring those things up, and when I don't frame it, I don't say, it's the same thing as a doctor. I don't, No, what I'm trying to get at is
you did once and it didn't go well.
I did once and it didn't go well. I have changed that tactic for sure.
Changing your
but
mind.
in follow-up conversations, you still try to guide it towards, we are professionals, we're continued education, and they still look at you kind of like dumb tree guys. And they still kind of have that stigma that still exists. Again, it's industry-wide, but do you see a way, other than educating and, speaking passionately about what we do you see any other ways that we can kind of fight that stigma?
I'm going to answer your question with a question.
All right.
What is it, do you think, that creates that impression with a potential client?
I would say it's the client's lack of insight into what it means to have these certifications and these qualifications.
And
okay. What else?
Through this conversation, I might be going a little off track with this, but I don't think we need to compare ourselves to doctors. What we do is different, and we can respond as total professionals. And if you respond knowledgeable and you come with science and you talk from a place of education, then that's not a factor. I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to do surgery on you. I'm here to take care of your trees, and this is what I know about trees, and this is what I'm seeing with your trees. And if you come from that perspective, then I don't think you got to worry about whether or not they think of you as a doctor.
Right. But I'm not trying to make us akin to doctors. I'm just trying to make us a professional, respected, trying to come across as a professional, respected professional. We know what we're talking about.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Though we're our own profession.
They don't see us as professional.
Right. Yeah. They see us as
let's get at this. Let's get at this a little bit. This is important, and the reason I ask, what do you think creates that impression, is I think there are many things that we can do intentionally that are, some of them are active, some of them are passive, some of them are verbal, others are nonverbal, that establish ourselves as professionals. And let me give you a quick list, seriously off the top of my head. First one, dress like a professional.
Yeah.
Right? What an idea, right? When you're going to go out to see a client. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'll share with you some decisions I've made for myself and for my business.
Mm-hmm.
When I go see a client, I wear a high visibility vest over an appropriate outer layer for the weather. That is either a nice looking fleece, a raincoat, maybe a puffy jacket if it's cold. I wear an appropriate hat that either is about something in the tree profession, or I've got a rain hat that I like, or a warm stocking cap for the winter, and none of them have a beer logo or a hockey team on. I love hockey. It has nothing to do with the tree world. I'm not wearing a ripped hoodie. I'm not wearing dirty Carhartts. I may not even be wearing work boots per se, right? I'm not going up in their tree. I've got a pair of, slip-on leather, whatever they are, Merrill or Keen boots to keep my feet warm and dry. I've got a clean pair of, whatever they are, TrueWork pants, Carhartt pants, Arborwear pants, whatever, something that seems appropriately, outdoorsy yet clean, right? Well maintained. I made sure that I shaved, for instance, or at least that my beard is trimmed. I have a business card. And I approach them as a professional would. And I introduce myself. Hi, how are you? I've already confirmed my appointment with them. I have a website that represents the company and looks professional. And all of my communications, my behaviors, my actions, my verbal and nonverbal communication says, I am a professional. I want to start from that foundation. Because if I show up with something less, if I show up with sawdust in my underwear and coming out of my pockets and my Carhartts are ripped and I got a pair of, Carolinas on where the toes are worn out and I got my ball cap on backwards and I got, bar oil smudged on my face and I'm 30 minutes late and I come panting up to the door and say, sorry. Of course they don't think I'm a professional. And I'm using a bunch of stereotypes, right? And so I apologize if I offend anyone. But we
wearing
can
dirty
do
Carhartt.
ourselves a great disservice. But you're also not making a sales call.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
You're making a phone call, not a sales call, right?
You
So
never
there's
would
so
have
many
known.
things we can do. I'm not even wearing pants, you would imagine. Forget I said that.
Yeah.
But there's so many things we can do to set ourselves up for success that when we meet a client, they assume we are professionals.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They assume the best rather than the worst. And then all you have to do is don't let them down.
Uh-huh.
It's all in how you act. If
You
you
know-
act like a professional, they'll treat you like a professional until you prove them wrong.
That's a great point.
It goes back.
Well said.
It goes back to first impressions kind of thing. You can't ever take back a first impression.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you're going
I'll
there to talk and sell like something that involves some science and some know-how, and I'm just reiterating what you're saying. Basically, it's like, yes,
Which-
you want to be a professional if you're going to have a professional conversation.
And Becca, I want to ask you, which part of arboriculture does not involve science and know-how?
There are none.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and I'm thinking
Exactly.
about this, and I'm like, well, as long as you show up on time, does it? I mean, because I'm thinking if you show up and you're like a little, you're wearing dirty Carhartts, or and like you just went from one job to a bid or something, then someone would see you and be like, oh, they obviously like know what they're doing and they work hard and blah blah blah. But that's not necessarily the case, like, because you're not there to do the job then. You're there to have the conversation with them. And
Well, and what I would say, though, is if you show up, even if you're a little, you got your dirty Carhartt, you come off the job, that might not be ideal. But for whatever reason, if there's a scheduling, you worked late, you might be one strike down, but it's not one thing that makes you a professional.
That's
If you take your time to,
Absolutely.
like clean yourself off as much as you can, and, you show up and then you talk to them like a professional,
yeah,
and
your demeanor,
yeah,
right? Like, I
then
apologize, but
exactly. Then they'll look at you and be like, oh man, that guy, he was working hard, but when he opened his mouth, he knew what he was talking about.
yeah,
Sometimes that,
Exactly.
it's not just one thing. I think it's whatever you can control it with what's in mind is being a professional.
Mhm.
I always kept a clean shirt
Well.
and a clean hat in the car. There was a minute in my career where I was doing field work until about 1 p.m. Then the bids would start for the afternoon. So I'd show up, saw pants on, but I had, nice shirt and nice fresh hat in the car.
And that's awesome. Part of being professional is being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
If you got bids later in the day, have that extra gear. Make just in the same way you make sure you have something to write your bid on. Have a clean
that's
button-up
huge.
shirt, have a
nice
hat with the company logo, and that's great.
yeah. But I think even more. Sorry, Craig. Go ahead.
No. Please, Becca.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, definitely, like, presentability is one thing aesthetically, but I think if you just show up with and are polite, you're not like, and you're
If you show up
knowledgeable
at all.
Yeah, if you show up for one and on time, and you just kind of have an eloquency and some, and you're willing to share what you know with whomever it is you're interacting with. And I always found anytime that I've been in that situation and I will tell someone something that they didn't know, they're generally pretty perceptive to it, and they're like excited to have obtained this knowledge, and it makes our whole profession look a lot more professional. Just
Oh yeah.
being able to verbalize
For sure.
things like that and have people learn.
Speaking of knowledge, Becca, you're getting at a really important point, and something that I've noticed has happened a lot recently is talking with a prospective client on the phone or at an in-person site visit, and they'll say, I want to do this, or I want you to do this, or I need to do this, or I just want this. And what I've found is my favorite thing is to say, oh, really? Why is that? And I'll give you an example that happened today. I had one one phone call to return toward the end of the day. Called a guy who was a neighbor. He said, yeah, we got this and that. Trees overhang. Trees drop some limbs. And so I think we need to thin it. This is a big conifer, right? And wind sailing is this terrible, apocryphal, damaging practice that happens out here. It's made up. There's no science behind it.
Uh-huh.
Nope.
And he said, I think we need to thin it. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? He said, well, it's dropped some limbs and I was told that, thinning does this and that. I said, that's very interesting. Who told you that? He said, oh, I just heard it from somebody. I said, well, let me share with you a little bit about where that practice comes from, who made it up, and the fact that there is no science behind it. He said, oh, really? I said, yeah, let me share with you a little bit about how trees function. And we had this really great conversation. He came out of it like, wow, I didn't know that. I said, sure, I'd love to stop by. Let's take a look and see how we can reduce risk, and certainly by improving the health of the tree at the same time. But asking, and why is that, is one of the most valuable things I've learned, to start a conversation and open the door to explain, educate, empower the client, tree owner or manager with information about their trees. Because they may think they know what they want, but you wouldn't be standing there if they knew for sure, and or if they could do it themselves.
It's great that you just mentioned that, because I noticed throughout our conversation you have asked us for sitting here, and why is that? And we're all like, oh shit, now we gotta dig. But it does kind of boomerang back something that someone might say without being fully informed, and make them look a little bit deeper.
Well, and I think it's a great sales technique also.
Yeah.
Because going back to what's going to sell the job is the knowledge. If you ask them, then you're opening that conversation that gives you an opportunity to prove that you're a professional, and you're going to be able to, don't do it to try to rip them off and spend, get as much money as you can, but they're going to trust you when you give the fair price that they're going to be like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's obviously knowledgeable. That must be what it's worth. But if you don't take the time to have that conversation and you throw a price out there, they might balk at it and not have, and why wouldn't they? You haven't convinced them, that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. If you're knowledgeable and say the right, have the right information, you may be able to sell preservation on a tree that should be preserved, rather than the person before you who's like, this tree needs to come down.
Yeah.
Look at that dead branch.
Yeah. and
maybe we could change some terminology here and say you may be able to explain the value of preservation.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rather than sell it to them. I'm not selling anything, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to help them make the best possible decisions about their trees. And if they value the advice that we provide, I would really like it if they would hire us to implement those tree care recommendations.
Yeah.
I'm not selling them anything.
Yeah.
Selling is it as a verb. To sell is helping someone make an informed buying decision. Okay. But used as a pejorative in a connotation sense, to sell is associated with used cars, right? I'm not trying to convince anyone to do anything. I'm going to share information. They can make an informed decision and decide whether myself or Chop Tree Service is the right one to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, you're changing all these words in my lexicon. This is great.
I think it's healthy, though.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back
you
to...
remember what Suit Guy did, right?
Yeah.
His job was.
There's still some suit in you.
Yeah. And it goes back to, when you're on that bid, like my number one goal on the bid is not to, like you say, and we went over this in bidding and whatnot, but on the bidding episode, but it's not necessarily to sell them work, is to earn their trust, because once you earn their trust, then you can educate them, and you can, in that episode we were talking about how my number one goal is almost building a community, because then you can work with each other and they trust you and you have a much better relationship, and you're going to have over time, you're going to have a client that keeps coming back to you, and you earn so much more trust with a question than you do. If he had said, well, I heard that the, tree doesn't, it needs to be thinned, and you said, no, it doesn't, that he would, you know,
Yeah.
like the instant reaction is to be, if someone goes head to head against you, is to be like, well, yes, it does. My buddy told me. I trust my buddy.
Yep.
You know, but if you take the time to be like, well, why is that?
Yeah.
You know, then you're open. You're like going right beyond that mental barrier for them.
And I think ultimately the more that you can have these educational opportunities for people and present the, you know, the facts, and I don't know, I guess the coolest thing about it is that it's not just about like retaining a client or getting a bid or whatever. It's about like creating a sense of stewardship for trees and like making people who maybe didn't know any better or look twice at them, like turning people from just people who had trees on their property to people who could potentially be huge advocates,
Yeah.
which makes the whole urban forest more full.
Absolutely. Having a large tree, having any trees on your property in many ways makes you a steward rather than an owner.
Exactly.
And if we view trees as green infrastructure that benefit the entire community, then stewardship makes an awful lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, tree care is caring for and caring about trees.
Yeah. Well,
We got deep there, didn't we?
yeah,
I
that's what
love
it's
it.
about, though. So we've gone into.
So can I take issue with a word?
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to take issue with the word bid here for a moment.
Okay.
All right.
We were talking about professionalism.
Yep.
We were talking about being successful, having successful businesses, which a business must be profitable or it will not be a business very long. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? Business has to make profit,
Yes,
or otherwise
yes.
no business.
It's got to support
just
itself.
volunteering.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Right.
how businesses work.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's called a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
And so, as a business, one of the ways that we are successful is that we avoid being commoditized, or we avoid participating in a commoditized market. And a bid is something that is submitted for a commodity. If someone is selling, 25 units of pork belly on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, right? People might bid to buy that. If someone says, I have a tree to cut down, or I want 2 limbs cut off, or I just need this stump ground out, somebody, or many somebodies, might show up and say, well, I will bid $2,400. And somebody says, haha, I will bid $2,100. You will say, yes, but I really need the work, so I will bid $1,600, and I will take it from all of you. And I'm being a little silly about this, but if we approach our consultations with clients, you'll hear me use the term sales appointments, but if we approach our consultations with clients merely as the opportunity to show up, let them tell us what should be done, and then to name our best price, that is bidding, and that is stupid. I told you it was Friday. You're going to hear what I really think.
Yeah.
I love the thing.
Keep it going.
No, I love
the
it.
thing
Yeah, this is
Barack Obama. It's like Obama said, don't do stupid stuff, right? So if we show up and the client says, I just need you to cut off those 4 limbs, we have 2 possible responses. Okay, here's my price. And now we've just done what everyone else is going to do. Or, Becca, what question could we ask?
Why?
Why would you like
And why is that?
And why is that? Yes.
And by asking that question, and why is that, what have we just done? It is no longer a commodity.
Yep.
Because it's not the same scope of work that everyone else is going to show up and give them their lowest possible bid because I hope they get it. A commodity is something that is assumed to be the same, whether it's pork bellies or bentonite or whatever it is, right? It's assumed to be the same. And I'm going to guess that Sperry Tree Care and Happy Little Trees and Tree 133 all do work somewhat differently. And that's just fine. And the way that we would each approach a particular tree is going to be a little bit different. And what we see and what we recommend and what we charge will all be a little bit different. We are not in a commoditized industry. We are in a profession that requires knowledge and expertise to be applied to the benefit of someone else.
Yeah.
And if we just show up and bid work, All we're doing is saying, here's how much I'm willing to prostrate myself for your money.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, and why is that?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Well, let's talk about your tree. That's a beautiful whatever. Or, did you notice this over here? That's an indication of this. Oh, really? And now you're having a conversation. You're doing a consultation. And you can provide them recommendations and a dollar figure to implement those recommendations. And it's no longer a bid. It's no longer a commodity. And they're never going to hire Knucklehead Tree Service over you.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And if they do, it's probably not the person you want to be your client anyways, because you're not able to do your profession. You're working, you're going back to being a tool.
Yep. I've been on.
Don't be a tool.
Yeah.
I've been on so many consults or so many bids or whatever with individuals, and you'll start explaining these things. You'll start explaining, well, this is why we don't top trees, and this is why that tree doesn't need to be removed. And you just see their eyes glaze over, and they're just like, okay, get to the punchline. How much are you going to charge me? And it's just like, yeah, I don't want to do work for you. You're not.
Yeah.
This is not where I want to be.
Sometimes people have it in their
That freaks people
mind.
out when you tell them no.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I tell you a story?
Please
yeah.
do.
So yesterday, I'm sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop right now. I was sitting here yesterday. I called back a lead that came in through our website. A lead's just a name for a word for a contact. I called him back, and he said, so I'm down in Matthews Beach, which is, 2 miles from here. And he said, I'm down in Matthews Beach, and I've got a this and a that, and I need to cut this one down, and I need some limbs taken off of this and that. And I've already had a couple people out look at it, and I'd like you to come look at it too. And I said, oh, and why is that? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you've already spoken with several other companies. Why do you need me to come look at it? And that stopped him for a second. He said, well, maybe you might see it differently. I said, oh, tell me more about that. And I'll often ask, who else have you spoken with? Well, I talked to this and this and this. It gives me an opportunity to draw a comparison between different kinds of tree companies. The jack of all trades, the tree removal company, the tree preservation company. And he said, yeah, but they get this, and maybe you'll see something different, or maybe your price will be different. And I said, you know what? I'll tell you honestly, people don't hire us because we have the lowest price. Sometimes we do. But that's not why people hire us. They hire us because we see it differently and we do a different kind of work. Oh, really? Yeah. And all of a sudden we had this really interesting conversation, and where it started was he wanted another bid for what he viewed was a commodity. I need you cut tree, right?
Yeah.
And I heard these two people, they gave me prices. I wonder if yours is going to be better. And I don't want to go out there and just be the third bid. I would assume nobody wants to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided I want to find out what this guy's all about. I want to understand why he called me, and if he's open to having a conversation that might be a little different from what he's had with other people he's spoken with, other arborists, other representatives. And it was a very interesting conversation. I'm going to go see him a week from Monday.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah.
Don't be a tool.
Don't be a tool. And, it's one of those those rules of sales is set yourself apart. And that's kind of what you're doing. If everybody's else showing up and just offering to be a tool, you're setting yourself apart by saying like, hey, I'm not here to do that. I'm here to help you and your trees. And this is what they need. And this is why. I mean, right away, what you're doing is totally different than what those other people came and did. And yeah, that's what it's about. You're separating yourself from the pack there.
Somebody once said to me, if you're doing the same thing as everybody else, you're not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
I told you we could talk all night on this. I wasn't joking.
No. We can.
But Becca's going to tell us we have to get back on topic here.
Yeah.
You know what? I honestly think that was
yeah, I mean,
that was what was on the agenda. But if you have more stuff or any thoughts that you want to, because I'm just sitting here like a total sponge, just loving soaking this up. I have like a whole new dictionary.
You're like Sponge Becca?
Yes.
Well, how about this? A segment that we'll do now and then is kind of tips and tricks.
Okay.
So what are tips and tricks if you're trying to up your game? You know, as a arborist, as a company, you know, if you had a magic wand and you could up the game in the industry, what stands out as like something you could do?
Ooh, ask me that question again, because you went somewhere different than I was expecting. Try me one more time.
Okay. If you had a magic wand, right, and you could, we've talked about a lot of stuff here. I'm changing it up a little bit than the other question. You know, everything we've talked about, whether it's on the level of, you know, somebody up in their game personally as an arborist, a company up in their game, or the industry, what do you think is the important takeaway from this conversation? What is the tip and trick that would be really helpful?
Ooh, that's great. And I think my answer is, maybe this is advice, but is take responsibility for your own professional development. Look out for yourself. Think ahead, because no one else is going to do it for you.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
And I don't know if that's a tip or trick or a technique, but every one of us, probably everyone listening, can name at least one workshop, training event, book, article, something that they've been meaning to read, attend, participate in. Go do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Go do it. Because if you're just going to work, you're a hamster on the treadmill, right? And you're running, but you never get anywhere.
Yeah.
Go learn something new. Make a point to do it. Whether it's you set a daily goal, a weekly goal, whatever, and keep track of what you learn. There's so much out there. There's so many great free learning opportunities, whether it's TreeStuff webinars, podcasts, articles, magazines, free webinars, whether it's, you know, the Arbor pod ones that were done or I can't think of what they're called right now. PNW is doing some great podcasts and webinars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many free resources out there. It doesn't have to cost money. Go learn something. Go learn something about something you know nothing about. Go learn about biochar. Go learn about the bronze birch borer. Go learn about the spotted lanternfly. Go learn about rope construction. Learn about shippers. Learn about fall prevention. Learn about something, and follow your nose and learn something more about it, and then learn about something else, and just keep doing that. Don't be a hamster and don't be a tool.
Yeah.
I think a tip / trick kind of related to what you were just talking about is if even if it's a small thing that you feel like you've learned to the point where you're confident enough to explain it to someone else or try to teach them. I think teaching or educating someone on something is a great way to solidify that learning. So, so if you have the opportunity and you feel confident in something that you learned that's pretty new to you, I would say a good way to solidify that and to continue that education for yourself and for the person involved would be to explain something to someone or teach them something new, and that kind of continues that awesome cycle.
Pass it on.
Yeah, pass it on.
You learn it better, and then you've taught it to somebody else.
Well said, Sponge
Exactly.
Becca.
Yeah. I'm gonna, I think, piggyback on what you're saying, and it's find a mentor.
Yeah.
You know, whatever, whether we're talking about your individual skills or if you're trying to grow your business or trying to figure out where you're going in the industry, find someone that's already been there that you can talk to and learn from them, because that I've found, mentors that I've had, I still talk to them and, have great conversations and learn new things. And, and if you've been in the game for a long time, maybe find someone to mentor, because, kind of piggybacking on what you're saying too, is once you start learning, or once you start teaching, you start learning the subject that you're teaching in a whole new way, because you're looking at it from a different perspective now, and you're going to increase your own knowledge on it.
Right on.
Any other
Can
tips?
I share an idea?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go for it.
So if I had a magic wand, I would, well, I guess one is I would encourage everybody in our profession to create a resume. That's one part. And the second part is I would encourage everybody to create a resume that has 3 parts to it. I was going to say 2, but it's really 3. The first one is sort of the professional qualifications, work history, typical resume stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Class A CDL. I'm a certified arborist. I'm track qualified. I'm a CTSP, and I worked for these companies for these years. Yada yada yada. Right? That's a typical resume. The 2 other parts. One would be about mentors, and I wasn't sure who it was that just brought that up, but I would love to see on a resume list 3 people who've been a mentor from you, and what's something you learned from each one.
I like that
Right?
idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I would have like
And so
2
then I have to
pages.
I probably would too. The third part was actually suggested to me. I don't know if any of you guys know Keith Stoner. Keith has been working for True Work. Keith is at a lot of climbing competitions. Super great arborist, good friend of mine. Keith and I were talking the other day about the idea of definitive moments. And so the third part of the resume is describe one definitive moment, being something that happened to you, that you saw happen, that was maybe it was scary, maybe it was intense, maybe it was an incident that happened. Something, a definitive moment, and what you learned or did differently because of that.
Yeah.
Man, that's great.
That would be an epic way to do resumes,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
What
yeah.
are your qualifications? Who are 3 mentors, and what you learn from each one? And describe a definitive moment in your career and what you learned or do differently because of it. That's my magic wand wish.
Oh,
That's a
man.
good one.
Great one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great information. And even, that goes to if you're hiring someone also, those would be great questions to ask just to see what, if you ask someone who are your mentors and what did you learn from them? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, that probably tells you a lot
Yeah,
about the
right.
person. But if they're like, oh man, I could fill 2 pages with that. And they just start telling you all this stuff. You're like, okay, this is someone that wants
Yeah.
to learn.
Well, and I mean, just the fact that I feel like the whole time you were presenting that to your magic wand scenario to us, we were all just like beaming, thinking about what our answers might be,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Those are some good thinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities for us to together, all of us, everyone listening, everyone participating in this profession, there's so many opportunities for all of us to together elevate the level of skill, knowledge, professionalism. But we have to do it together.
Absolutely.
It takes leadership, but it takes all of us getting on the bus, pulling in the same direction. I don't know what pulling and the bus have to do together, so that sort of undermined my metaphor there. But rowing in the same direction on the bus.
Rowing the
Let's go
bus.
with that.
Rowing the bus.
Rowing the bus.
Row the bus.
Here at Tree Thinking, we're
Rowing the
just
bus.
rowing the bus along.
Row the bus, baby. Row the bus.
We got to all go in the same direction.
Yeah.
We got to all go in the same direction.
Yeah.
And we got to care.
Come on,
care
get on the
about
bus
trees.
and start rowing.
Exactly.
Row.
We got to
your
care
bus.
about trees. We got to care about ourselves, and we got to care about the people we work with and we work for. And there's so much we can all do together. And I want to say thank you to you guys before you get around to it. I want to say thank you for what you are doing for our profession with this podcast and bringing together really great people, yourselves and all the guests you've invited. And I'm honored to be part of this and what you are doing to help us all row the bus in the right direction. I'm psyched to be part of this. This is
Oh, man.
being an arborist is sincerely the coolest job in the world.
It
It
is.
is the coolest job in the world. It's way cooler than being a doctor.
Well, thank you, Craig, for
But sincerely, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank
man.
you for the thought you've put into things. Like I've said maybe 4 words that you've thought like thoroughly about and are thinking like, well, we should change it to this to elevate the industry. I mean, That's huge. You're sitting you're sitting
Yeah.
at home thinking about bidding and like, no, there's a better word for that, you know.
Yep.
It's just going to make us better. That's something I'm really taking away from this, is changing what I say, and that changes how I think about these things too.
Yep.
And just thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, here, I think we're kind of to this point. Let's do final thoughts, because it sounds like you're kind of starting it. Anyways, we like to kind of wrap up the show with just, just even if it's just one thing you take away from the conversation that you're going to take with you, and we'll let you kick it off, Craig. What's your final thought on this episode?
Well, I think the final thought is I want to read that definition of a profession again.
Yeah.
I want to leave us with that. So, according to the Australian Council of Professions, a profession is a disciplined group of individuals who adhere to ethical standards and who will hold themselves out as and are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge, skills in a widely recognized body of learning derived from research, education, and training at a high level, and who are prepared to apply this knowledge and exercise these skills in the interest of others. As arborists, we must be, and we must act as professionals. That is how we will together row the bus in the right direction.
Man, I think that's like the perfect ending.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat.
Yeah. Cannot top
I don't
that.
have a final thought.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you this evening, and I'm very inspired right now. I don't know. I feel like we all kind of are
Yep.
sitting here beaming and feeling rejuvenated by this conversation. So thank you very much, Craig.
I would say my final thought here is to kind of go back to the beginning of our conversation. You and me were talking about how we came from such, got into the industry in such different ways. But I think what has gotten us through into where we're at now is the same thing, and that's working hard. You're talking about how you were working hard, to get going and to earn the respect of the crew and whatnot. And it was the same thing for me when I was first starting out. I was the boss's kid coming on a crew, and I had the choice of either just being the boss's kid and, I could have just done minimal to make it and I would have had a job. But instead I decided, screw that. I'm going to set the standard, because these guys aren't going to let the boss's kid outwork them. And so I just did my best to outwork everybody, whether it was just hauling brush or whatever I could do. I just did it as good as I could. I think that's the key to progressing, in the industry. That and, more Instagram pictures of cool limb walks to make the good pruning cut instead of removals.
Yeah, buddy.
Get out on those tips.
Yeah, get out to the tips. And with that, I would say stay safe and watch your top knot.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Craig.